a better option. But you'll need a larger diameter rope, so it may not fit your hardware. And because of where the splice is, it increases your minimum length of rope that you're required. And that's typically why you use grommet or grommet or endless loops, is you're trying to get high strengths in a short length. That's the biggest benefit of using an endless sling. And you can use a smaller diameter to fit around your hardware. Usually you use more rope, more fiber for the same strength. So a less efficient use of fiber. So on a grommet, one of the things I mentioned was fitment with your splice. So if you see the pictures A, B, and C to the right, the far right is pretty common. You put the splice in the middle between the two bearing points. Or B, this is what I would recommend if your splice fits on your hardware, if there's no constraints. So you center the splice bending across it. And C, we don't recommend, because when you get a new rope or even a used rope, when you go from no tension to tension, the structure tightens down on itself, and putting that little bit of rope doesn't allow it to equalize as well around that splice section. So A and B, there's no difference in strength, and so we recommend B, and if B doesn't work, then A. And I think the last bullet point, C, it can create unpredictable results, like I said. So it's not recommended to have your splice partially sitting over the pin. So you want to center it, or you want it in the middle of the leg. Some more sling considerations. So this picture here is actually a jacketed rope, or a rope with a protective covering on the outside, so the strength members on the inside. So this allows for abrasion protection, sharp corners, nicks. Sometimes it's easier to handle, but you can't open it. It's harder to open up and inspect. So a single braid rope, you can push it open and inspect the internals, inspect the surface. So a lot of times that's the preferred method. And usually jacketed ropes are stiffer, just the feel of them, they're a lot stiffer to work with. And since the jacket's not adding strength, a single braid rope will be more efficient use of fiber. So jackets can be made out of polyester or Dyneema, but that jacket's not adding strength to your rope. And then most of the stuff we talked about was ASME, and everyone uses multiple lifts. It's a standard lifting sling, that kind of stuff. But there's other projects that we do, a lot of offshore projects, where it's more engineered lift. It's more a one-time or a specific uses. And with D&V and different standards out there, we use different safety factors. And the way we do this is we have to have a lot of knowledge and understanding of the way we're using our rope, the D it's going to be used in, and repetitive testing. So if you look at this project, this was done in the South China Sea. They used some large diameter AM steel blue. So what they're lifting is a well jacket, and the rope strength is 2,800 tons in a basket. And for this project, they had ABS certified. So this is ABS came in, and we did a brake test for them, and they certified all the ropes they used for this project. And the biggest value to the customer was the weight reduction. They couldn't have done this with wire rope because of the crane capacity. So this was enabling technology for this project. And for these large projects and some of the stuff that we've developed, we have this tool we call the Sling Configurator. It's a tool that the engineering department uses, so they can put in your required overall length. You can put in your pin diameters, your eye sizes, whatever you may require, and it will spit out for us expected break strength based on the D rating. And then, if you want a short, it gives you minimum lengths, that type of stuff. So this is tools that we've developed over time with a lot of testing and specified use. So if there's an engineered lift out there, something where we know that it's going to be used for this object, we can help figure out a break strength versus just using the standard D rating charts. And I think I touched on a lot along the way, but a lot of stuff is online on our technical bulletins. There's several on rope selection, uses and retirement, industrial, commercial, marine, that type of stuff. I mentioned there's a lifting sling brochure that's there. We also have pocket inspection guides, so you get their little paper guides that look like a rigging inspection, but we also have an iPhone app with the same information. So it has that abrasion comparator on there, has splice inspections, splice instructions on there, and contact information. So you can get that on your iPhone. We don't currently have an Android app, but it's pretty handy if you're out there in the field. Usually people prefer the pocket brochure, but it's, you know, if you need to talk to somebody about it, we also have the iPhone app, and you can get that from the Apple store. All right, that's what I got for you guys.
Thanks for your presentation, Isaac. It's been very informative. We've had a couple questions drift in. Would you mind answering a couple questions for the group?
I would love to.
One of the first questions that came in, is there a pin diameter or a shackle size methodology to make sure I get the right size shackle for an ionized sling, and then also the right size shackle if I were going to connect a grommet in an ionized situation? So, you know, we see a lot of concern in the industry about synthetic products and, you know, the round slings, and some of the major manufacturing houses are saying, if you use my sling of this size, use this size shackle. What does Samson have to say about that for their Am Steel Blue?
Well, we typically recommend that you're looking at the working loads of your shackles, so the shackles are all rated. You want to make sure that your shackle is as least as or stronger than the rope that you're using. And typically, I recommend that it's stronger because you don't want that shackle to fail. You know, part of a big thing of synthetic rope is increasing safety, and you don't want to deform or damage your shackle based on not having the right size. So we look at working load limits, and far as grommets, there's also pin diameters that you want to look at. So you could use that same D rating chart to help understand the strength of your rope, but you would still want to make sure to look at that working load limit of your shackle exceeds that rope.
We have one attendee that's sent in a request to confirming that he has the correct information, that you're recommending a shackle is 2 times larger than the diameter of the rope. Just want to get that man's question answered, if that's cool. We can come back to that question in a few minutes.
Okay, I think I hear him right. That the diameter of the shackle is 2 times the diameter of the rope?
Yes, in an ionized Samson Am Steel Blue.
Okay. So we recommend a pin diameter of minimum of 1 to 1. It's pretty common to use a 2 to 1 diameter, but again, it's more important to look at the working load. For an ionized sling, you're not going to lose strength in the rope as long as it's larger than the rope diameter.
Fantastic. Well, that's a huge issue there for us. Another gentleman that sent in, is the Am Steel Blue slings allowed to be used in all 3 hitches? And he wrote, is it a vertical, choker, and basket? Is there a capacity for all 3?
Yes. Take a look at that lifting sling brochure. They're all on there. Yep.
I sure appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had another question came in here about, would you describe HMPE?
Okay. HMPE is high modulus polyethylene. We use a product, the brand name is called Dyneema. It is, the fiber itself is able to float in water, so the rope can float, so it's low density, but it's the same strength as steel for the size rope that we make out of it. The polymer itself has high resistance to UV and chemicals.
Fantastic. Appreciate that. We were really receiving some good questions here, so we'll just keep working through them as we go along.
Good.
But is there a number of, you described it, I'm paraphrasing for the customer, for our attendee, you described a filament is then built into yarn, and yarn is then built into a strand, and then strand is then braided. And the question is there a number of cut strands that would equal rejection?
Again, anytime there's retirement criteria, it's going to be industry dependent. But we do have some. We recently did a technical paper on cut strand and strength loss. You can also find that on our website.
And we have another question just came in, and really appreciate that, Chris. Appreciate you reaching out with that question. What are the heat restrictions you use for these slings? Is there a temperature limit?
Yes. So the critical temperature is 140. Now, as I mentioned, there's not a critical freezing temperature. So as you get colder, it increases in strength. So our testing is done at room temperature. You see a big decrease in strength after 140. So the curve is pretty fast after 140. It doesn't mean the rope doesn't start melting at 140, but that's when you start losing a significant amount of strength.
And we're going just a little bit afar here, but does that 140-degree temperature also apply for the new hoist line that made its debut at ConExpo?
I believe it does.
Okay. And then we have a question here from Jim. Which rope is the most saltwater resistant?
Well, HMP isn't affected by the salt water, so we do testing in salt water. So we bring water and we soak the rope in it, and then we test it in the water. It doesn't affect the rope. The salts don't have any effect on the fiber, and the fiber doesn't absorb water, so it's hydrophobic.
So it does not absorb water. Fantastic.
Correct.
Then we have a really good question here from Felipe about can we use two slings together to form a basket hitch? And if the answer is yes, it's kind of a two-part question here for us, here, Isaac. If the answer is yes, what is the requirement to do it safely?
Well, you can use them together. It depends on how you're putting together. For a lift, I'd be curious of how you could use a shackle to put the two together, or they can be spliced eye and eye together. So they can be when they splice them, they splice an eye in an eye. I don't know if that comes clear without a picture, but that they're not removable once you do that, though. And then there's also people do cow hitches, which reduces the rope strength. So anytime you're doing tight bends, it reduces the rope strength. So knots are they're not recommended in any way, especially not in lifting. The rope's very slick, so the knots will actually come undone. So it depends on how you'd be putting the two together and what your kind of lift setup would be. But yes,
sure,
you can.
We definitely recommend that you connect the two slings together with some appropriately sized hardware there.
Right.
Thanks for that answer there. And we have another good question from Jim about, I believe it does the HMP float.
Yes. So in some of the offshore projects we do, the HMP floats, our ropes are AMSA blue floats, and sometimes for some projects we put weights in them to actually have parts of the rope not float. So, but the rope itself does float.
If I'm picking up what you said there, Isaac, I sure appreciate your helping us with these technical questions, that the two individual slings that can be independent or separate from each other, and then they can be joined together with a shackle. Felipe is asking, yeah, they can be independent slings as long as they're sized with the appropriately rated hardware.
Correct.
There's another question came in here, whether or not you provide training to qualify people to splice slings.
We typically qualify our distributors, and they can do that as well. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to our customer service department, and they can see what they can do for you.
Okay. And we really appreciate the attendees asking these questions that are driving getting accurate and concise, usable knowledge. And then we appreciate Isaac's help applying the skill to use that knowledge accurately. We have another real good question coming in here from Chris. appreciate all the questions. Have you done any research on braiding slings similar to wire, such as a 3-part or a more multi-part, 3, 7, 9 multi-part slings?
I'm not quite sure I know, but I think you mean like when they take separate wire ropes and they turn them into grommets?
Or braided I&I slings, yes.
Yeah, okay. We don't currently do that. You know, I think it's been talked about, but I don't know if we've done any testing on that.
Of the different rope classes that you presented to us today, the braided and 8-strand or the different materials, which is the most recommended for lifting, and do you have one that's maybe your #1 top seller recommended
lifting?
for lifting? Yes.
Lifting is typically AM steel blue, but certain projects they look at other ropes with jackets, like I mentioned. So we have another product called Turbo that has a braided over jacket, but typically it's AM steel blue.
Fantastic, fantastic. A question came in about describing the process to inspect the sling. I know you talked about taking your hands and pushing it together to look for the internal abrasion versus the external abrasion, but could you allude a little bit more on what's the process to inspect one of these slings?
Yeah. So when you're inspecting rope or a lifting sling, you want to look at the key contact points like you would a wire, and then if you look across the body of the rope. If you're inspecting a specific area, what you can do is, we call it bird caging. You put your hands on the rope and you push it together, and you should be able to open it up. And it doesn't damage the rope to pull the strands apart and look inside and look for the abrasion or the fuzz that happens. And that you can compare to those pictures I showed you. In addition to, you're going to look for the cut strands. And if you're thinking of longer lengths, so if you're a working rope or a winch line, if you see damage happening, you may want to look at where that is along the length. If there's a specific area you could address on your hardware or equipment.
We have a question here about how knots decrease the strength of the rope, and we'd want to throw out some good information to folks to remember that it's not an acceptable or a recommended practice to use knots in an overhead lifting environment, but we can sure see how knots could be used in other applications of your AM steel blue. So if you could, Isaac, give us a little bit of input there about how knots affect the strength of a rope in a non-overhead lifting situation.
Right. Well, with HMPE or our AM steel blue made of HMPE, it's a very slick material, so it doesn't hold knots very well, so we don't recommend them. We have other ropes designed to be able to hold knots. I have personally done a little bit of testing on it out of curiosity, and I can tell you that what happens is as you load it, the knot actually comes undone or it pulls through itself. There is certain types of knots that you can use out there. One is a double barrel that can hold, but again, like Jim said, it's never recommended, especially not for overhead lifting.
And I think we may have touched on this earlier, but you currently, as Samson currently doesn't offer 3 or 4 part braided bridles. So you're
right.
taking 3 or 4 rope diameters and putting them together to come up with a finished diameter of a multi-part system.
No, we actually have a few ropes. If you think about it, we braid a rope, and then we braid them into a larger rope structure. They're not designed necessarily for lifting slings. We have a rope we call the mud rope, so it's designed to be for anchor lines and offshore projects they use for mooring. But that's not. I don't think that's the same thing that you're talking about there. We don't like the heavy lift slings that you're talking about that I've seen for wire grommets and single leads, where they take individual ropes and they hand put them together. We have ropes that are you take a grommet and you make a basket out of it, so it's a basketed grommet. That's a similar idea, but they're not twisted together.
Fantastic. I appreciate it. And Melissa, thanks for your feedback. And Melissa was very cautious there about, again, lifting with knots, so appreciate your recognition of the danger there, Melissa. So as we continue this story here, talking about these synthetic slings and the real advantages of them there, talked about the environment, and so we got 140 degrees. And how do they do in relation to exposure to chemicals? Did we cover that clearly?
Now, I did touch on a few of them. So we've done a lot of testing with chemicals and different concentrations. So on that list, there was quite a few chemicals, a few that stand out, hydrochloric acid. There was minimal strength loss, so what we did is we submerged it in this chemical for 6 months in a concentrate. So that means as if you left your sling in a bath of hydrochloric acid, then you took it out and then did a braid test. That's what we did. And we saw minimal strength loss of most chemicals. There's a list online. One that stands out to me, I believe there was somewhere around 9% strength loss with a concentrate of chlorine bleach. And so that's leaving the rope in chlorine bleach for 6 months. And we saw 9–10% of strength loss. There's a list of these chemicals. You can also find it on our website. It's also in the rope usage and selection criteria and on the lifting sling brochure.
And I sure appreciate your help, Isaac. We have a gentleman named Matt sent in a good question asking about a D-to-D relationship. And so if you could take a moment and describe, when we say the term D-to-D, take just a moment to describe the term D-to-D. What's the large capital D stand for? That's the diameter of the shackle or the object, correct?
Correct.
And then the smaller case D is going to be the diameter of the wire rope, or the diameter of the synthetic sling.
Correct.
So if we're using a 1-inch grommet with a shackle, what size should the shackle pin be?
We recommend a minimum of a 3-inch. To get full strength, you're looking at 8 or larger.
So the recommendation is an 8-to-1, but you can go down to a 3-to-1 as long as you take the capacity reduction.
Yeah, and that same capacity reduction chart is on that lifting sling brochure. So if you're using a grommet, I would highly recommend looking at that lifting sling brochure. Ask questions of your distributor, or feel free to give customer service a call and we'll help you out.
Boy, fantastic. Hope that helped you, Matt. Then we have another question here about how does the sun or UV affect the life of your rope?
That's a great question. So it depends on the diameter of your rope. So what we've seen and how we understand it is UV is a surface phenomenon. So it's the rays coming from the sun, and they can only penetrate the rope so deep. And we've done different studies on this. Dyneema has also done studies on this. But over effects of years, you'll see we had I think it's an 8mm rope we have described out there on the website, and so that's pretty small. You can see significant decrease in life, but then if you look at our mooring ropes, so a rope that's 2 inches in diameter, which wouldn't be uncommon for a large lifting sling, 2 inches in diameter, you see a lot less effect on the overall strength of the rope because it's only the surface yarns that are being affected.
Well, one of the questions that goes along with the UV story is, what would be the physical appearance of the rope that would indicate UV damage is present?
Oh, right, good. So usually bleaching or fading of the color.
So very, very similar to our flat web world, where we have a loss of color as a really strong leading indicator that we have an issue happening there. As we're kind of getting a little bit off of the sling story, but still on the high performance rope, would be the how do I clean rope? The gentleman who's asking the question, appreciate that, Jim, is referring to digger derricks. Is there a proper method or way to clean these ropes?
Yeah, again, I would recommend soap. Soap and water is totally fine. Use it. We have a cleaning method. So if you, it's on our website. I think it's actually under Splice instructions. But what you do is you can soak the rope in water and soap, and you take the rope and you bird cage it and you open it up. If there's dirt on the inside, you can pull it together, the rope, and open it up and help get that dirt out. But usually soap and water will get your rope clean.
Sure, and sure appreciate that. You have another question here about, do do you have a distributor or representation in the nation of Brazil?
That's a good question. I don't think we have a distributor in Brazil, but we could find out for you. You could contact customer service, and they'll figure it out for you. We do have offices in the UK and in Singapore and in Australia.
And not last but least, but do you provide help to clients in developing a critical lift plan of heavy objects? And if you do so, are they available to the general public?
So we're not necessarily lifting engineers. We're rope engineers. We understand our product really well and how it's used in different applications. So we can always help when there's questions that come up, especially about strength and bendidity and stuff like that. But we're not lifting engineers.
And so we're going to have posted up on our website a link there to be able to, or at least get Samson information. You can contact them. So some of these questions may be best followed on with more conversation by contacting Isaac or contacting the Samson main office there in Ferndale, Washington. We have a question. It's a little bit off the path, but it's still in the synthetic rope world. The new hoist rope that was brought into place here, that's a core rope, has a core inside of it, has strands on the outside of it. Does it fall with the same criteria here as far as inspection process?
I believe we're developing a specific one to dive into that, but it's very similar in process. You're looking at the very same abrasion that would occur on the inside and outside of the rope. So, and if you want more details specifically on that rope, I definitely suggest contacting customer service. But we do have on our website, that's one of the being the new product, that's on our website, and you can find out some information on there as well. So there's an FAQ, common questions asked list on there that has a lot of that type of stuff.
Well, Isaac, that's a wealth of information. This is Jonathan Parnell again. Thank you so much for presenting your products and helping us understand a little bit more about the industry of synthetic ropes and how they're applied. We're out of time for questions, but if you have additional questions, they can be sent to either myself at jonathan@iti.com or jim@iti.com, or Isaac specifically. And Isaac, I can actually send everyone your email address.
Yep.
You have it available?
I do. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
It's Rosenberg at samsonrope.com.
All right, Rosenberg at samsonrope.com. And if you're still on the line, I've sent that link in the chat pane. From there, go ahead and ask Isaac any of your additional questions. And with that, we will conclude. Isaac, thanks again so much for
it was my pleasure.
On it. Yeah. For additional webinars, we have one more coming up in December, and be looking for that topic coming soon. With that, we will sign off. Thanks so much for attending.
Thank you.